Wednesday, April the 6th. Sorry about no fishing report last week. I was down at the Arkansas River fishing. But as far as what's going on here, lake level's about normal, about 9:15 and a half. And water temperature's kind of the same old story. It's the same as it's been the last month or so. It just seems like it won't warm up. It's still mid-50s. You might find, high 50s late in the afternoon when the sun gets out, but the wind's been blowing so much that it's stirring that water up, and I think that's kind of holding it back from warming up. As far as the wind, I think if the wind would blow a little bit, it might help the bite out, but we've had crazy wind. Today, probably, 20, 25, gusting to 35. Looks like we're going to have the same thing tomorrow. As far as the bite goes, there's a light line bite that's getting pretty good. And what I mean by a light line, we're catching fish on 6-pound line on spinning rods. We're catching them on little 4-inch grubs. I don't really think it matters whether it's a Yamamoto, a Bass Pro Shop XPS, a Chompers. But it seems like salt and pepper's working good. A smoke with a black flake, a smoke with a red flake. We'll zoom in on these baits here after a little bit and show you. And also Ned rig's working pretty good. And this bite seems to be working the best for me up in the White River, from about the mouth of where the James and the White come together up to Shell Knob. That's the best looking water. It's just, as far as clarity, it's just about normal. It's got 6-7 foot of visibility up there. Problem fishing this stuff, we're mainly fishing on main lake gravel. That seems to be where the best bite is. Some of it's on the point, some of it's in the pockets. A lot of them smallmouth will pull up in there to spawn and seem to be catching a bunch of little knotheads, a bunch of buck bass, but you got to weed through some of the small ones. Now, some of the Kentuckys we're catching are them real big fat thumper Kentuckys, 2.5, 2 3/4 pounders, and they're out there in 12 to 15 foot of water, staging out off the gravel points. Some days they're suspended about 6 to 8 foot deep. Other days you got to get the bait down on the bottom and just barely scratch the bottom. But like I say, when the wind's blowing 25 miles an hour, even if you get to a point where the waves aren't crashing in, it's still kind of hard to keep in contact with your bait, so you can feel what's going on. Most of the time it's just a pressure bite. It just loads up. And I've tried to, with the wind out there, I've tried a jerk bait and I've tried an Alabama rig, but it seems like they want that small grub. And, it's definitely what the fish are eating. I caught a fish on it today. I went to unhook my bait out of the fish's mouth, and I told my client, look at this fish, how many shad he's got in his mouth. I turned the fish upside down and we dumped 16 shad that were about 1 inch to 1.5 inches long just by shaking them. I don't know how many the fish had in his gut, but like I say, the bait they're feeding on is real small. I think that's why the little grub is working good. And, the Ned rig, if you can get into a pocket where it's pretty slack, I've been catching some really good smallmouths, but you seem like you got to catch a lot of little ones to catch a good one. And a lot of those 6 to 10 feet deep, and I think they're coming off of beds that I just can't see. A couple different colors I'm throwing. I'm throwing it on a 3/16 ounce head. I'm throwing a Strike King Zero, cutting it in half. And it's a green pumpkin, and the other one's called a bomber craw. And I'm throwing it on a 3/16 ounce mushroom head. They got little weed guards on them. Most of the time I'm snipping the weed guards off because the line tends to get hung up on the weed guard. But just got to fish it extremely slow. Now, as far as the crankbait bite, the way the wind's been blowing, you'd think all you'd have to do is put the trolling motor down and wind. Well, I've tried that quite a little bit, especially today. We're up in the James River. And, we caught a few fish on it, but not very many for as many miles of shoreline as we covered. It seems like my best crankbait bite has been from Kimberling City down towards the dam. And you'll notice a big watercolor change right about the Kimberling City Bridge. From there towards the dam, it's still got a lot of turnover color. And it's darker water, some green and some brown. And that seems like where the better crankbait bite has been for me. And I understand that there's a good Alabama rig bite in the same area. I haven't found it. I've been throwing it on and off quite a bit, but I haven't put the A-rig deal together as far as finding out what type of structure they're on. Most of the crankbait fish that I've been catching are more main lake rather than the past 2-3 previous weeks they've been back in the creeks. It seems like they're on the main lake where a lot of these fish, I think I talked about it a couple weeks ago, that there's another group of fish moving up out of the deeper water starting to stage. And we're still probably 2 weeks away from having, a big movement of fish coming into spawn. There's a few trickling in because, they don't all go by the full moon and the water temperature. I think a lot of them go by a combination of the lengths of the days and the water temperature. And, a lot of them are doing it now, I am seeing a little bit of bass fry up in the Shell Knob area where some fish have already spawned out, but, not very much. Like I say, there's very few that have come in, and I think it'll be another couple weeks before we have a big wave of fish come in and start spawning. But we should also have another big wave of fish, staging on these main lake points. The problem with some of these main lake fish, main lake point fish, a week and a half ago I could catch them on a football jig or like a pig rig or a hardhead. My bottom bite out there seems to have left. Most of the fish I'm catching out there now is suspended, and we are starting to see a lot more in that 6 to 8 to 10 foot. And even when you go back in these creeks and these pockets where the fish are going to be spawning, you get out there in 12, 15 foot of water and you see fish suspended all over the place, 6 to 8 foot. I think some of them are crappie, but a lot of them are bass. They're not really feeding, but they're just waiting for the water temperature and the time to get right to move up and spawn. So they're kind of in the middle of, we call it like a spawn funk, that, there's fish in the backs of the creeks, but it's hard to get them to react to a reaction bait. Seems like the bites I have gotten back there, I've had to fish dead slow. They've either been on a shaky head or a Ned rig. And another thing I've been throwing some is a Crocker Gator swamp bug, a green pumpkin on an 1/8 ounce football head, fishing it real slow. And go ahead and zoom in and I'll show them, the swamp bug's a pretty neat looking deal. You don't have to move it very much. It's got a lot of action on the tail. It's kind of a combination, almost looks like a little French fry or centipede with a big tail. And on the Ned rigs, the bomb craw, the green pumpkin, and you can throw them on anywhere from an 1/8 ounce to a 1/4 ounce head. The grubs, just the regular old standbys of smoke with a black flake, smoke with a red flake, and some days the salt and pepper's working better. You just got to kind of mix it up and try it, different ones, depending on how much wind and how deep. I'm usually fishing these on an 1/8 ounce head, an open head, and a bait that I did not mention that I'm actually catching a little better on than the grub is a little Kitech. It's a 2.8 Kitech. I've been throwing some different colors. This one here is a bluegill flash. That's more the size of the bait than the grub or anything else that I'm throwing. I seem to be getting more bites on the Kitech than I am on the grub. Now with the Kitech, here's one right here. They're a lot softer bait. They don't last as long. So what I'm having to do is put a little super glue up here to help keep the bait on, so I get a few extra fish on it. But seems like, like I say, the rainbow shad, there's I think a golden shiner, anything that looks like a shad, I think will work. But this is definitely working a little bit better than the grub. So hopefully, wind will settle down. It looks like it's going to blow for the next 2 days, but we've had extreme wind for the past 2 or 3 weeks. That's made it difficult to fish exactly where you want to fish. So we've had to kind of run around to areas that are protected, and some of them aren't the most ideal places that we want to fish, but we're just having to make do with, the best we can with the weather. So till next week, good luck, good fishing.